I don't want to sound smug or in any way conceited, but at that point in time, I honestly believe that I was the only person who could properly call matches of that caliber.
Chuck Leve, everyone knows him as probably the best referee we've ever seen. Keep in mind the politics that was fuming everywhere in early pioneer racquetball. He came in as a player, and I remember, of course, he was from the Mort Leve family of handball fame, who was the right-hand man of Bob Kendler. And he was planning to hopefully work in the business because he really loved the sports. Very, very smart person. But he actually played in the Nationals and did reasonably well in 1971. I lost to Charlie Garfinkel that year. I can't remember whether Chuck Leve had played earlier against I can't remember which player he played against, but he was there and he was quick, athletic, and he reminded me a lot of the son of the lady that you were telling me about.
Nancy Martin?
Yeah,
Nathan
Nancy
Martin,
Martin, and she was like his son as far as quickness and super intelligent, and they played a really, really basic game. It was very good. I'll tell you another thing about Leve. He was able to go in that chair and control these matches against this group of mavericks that occupied the golden era, and he did it with class. I never got the feeling ever that Chuck Leve would lean the scale one way or the other because of the political winds. And I was very sensitive to the feeling of political winds, as was, I'm certain, all of the guys vying for number one. He controlled the match, he was classy, he dressed up while we dressed down, and he was quite a gentleman on the court and otherwise. So I have nothing but good things to say, and I hope you get an opportunity to speak to him, because of all of the people during that, say, 71 to 77, 78 time period, he was on top of the sport. And when he was replaced eventually by Bertolucci and Fancher, I don't know what caused that, but I would like to know, so I'll be watching your channel.
Okay, thank you.
So I thought today we could talk about refereeing, since you were the most
Yes.
prolific ref of the pros back in the day. And it's kind of hard to explain to other people, but you might have some secrets or tips to share with other wannabe refs.
Well, don't do it. Refereeing was, at least back then, was one of the most problematic issues facing the upper levels of play. The problem was that everything was first time. Strategies, shots, the players were inventing the game, as we went along. If you'd never seen it before or been there, it could be a real problem, with people bumping into each other, and what are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? How much space do you give somebody? What's a hinder? What's an avoidable hinder? Then you get into the area of controlling the match and the players, and how much is entertainment and how much is poor sportsmanship, and there were just all these different things. All I wanted was for the best player to win. Whoever played the best that day would win. I felt it was important that these were competitions and you wanted them to be fair. Whoever won, that's fine, but it should be done, within the rules. And applying the rules to the pros was a lot different than applying the rules to a couple of, C players and, at the Y. The other thing is, everybody has their own style. Every region had its own style. It was one thing if you were a plotting strategist, or if you were a power player or a retriever, you had a certain style that you played. And nobody ever saw it retrieving like Surratt or Wagner or, I mean, the pros couldn't ref themselves. That would be a conflict of interest. And nobody ever saw them play. I mean, in true high end, this is for all the marbles. I gotta, win this match or go home. Nobody could do it. And so we'd be in Southfield, Michigan, or we'd be in Miami, or we'd be in Portland, Oregon, or wherever we were. We were new to town. We were bringing a sport that people played, but they'd never seen like this. So who do you get to ref the matches? There was nobody else. Myself, and then eventually I trained Terry Fancher and Dan Bertolucci to do it. But I also had a vision of how a match should flow. That there should be a professional demeanor. So for the big matches, I'd dress nice and to sit on the perch or whatever, and I'd have a little canned little speech about, welcome, Mr. Brumfield and Mr. Bledsoe or whatever it was. And I had a cadence and a rhythm, and I tried to be the same all the time to take myself, the referee, out of the mix, and the players would get used to me, and they did. And they got used to how I called a match, and I got used to how they played, and it worked pretty well. So I called the quarters, the semis, and the finals. That got to be too much after a while, and that's when I worked in Fancher and Bertolucci to start calling the quarters, or at least if they took one, I could take the other two, and then I would do the semis and the finals. I took great pride in it. I enjoyed it. Probably the only person in the history of the sport who enjoyed refereeing the pros. But we were presenting something to the public. It was unique, but I wanted to keep it within certain safeguards. There was some violence, not necessarily personal violence, but I mean, and then there was the psychology and the intimidation factors. And I mean, everybody, did their thing. Obviously, Charlie was famous for it, but people developed their antidote to being intimidated by doing whatever they did. And none of them really were choir boys. I mean, they just, that's it, so that's how I got to refereeing so many of the matches. And like I said, I enjoyed it because I felt I was taking the referee out of the match. As we went along, things obviously needed improvement. So I invented the linesman, and I invented the appeal. Did it skip? Did it not skip? And all that kind of stuff. I invented the 11-point tiebreaker, which I don't know what they do now. Things to keep the matches legitimate, honest, straightforward, and just let the players play. So that's my thing on refereeing. We inherited those rules from handball. Hinder, avoidable hinder. Now, it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that with a racket and the speed with which the ball traveled being hit off a racket was a lot different than handball. Handball, you hit the ball and it hits the guy in the back. Okay, well, gee, ouch. You drill a guy in the back, with 110 mile an hour off the back wall blast from Hogan, and it comes out his belly button. So hinders were part of the game. I mean, it's a fast game. People bump into each other inadvertently, and that's just part of the game. It's a hinder. Also, you call it hinder for safety, and that's a typical situation that, in my opinion, in those days, only I could make the right call. And that was critical. If you get in front of somebody and that person can't hit a shot or the shot that's appropriate from that location and situation because you moved in front of that person, that's not a hinder. That's what we called an avoidable hinder. You didn't have to move in front of that person, even though you were doing it for positioning to retrieve the shot that person was going to hit. You took the shot away by your positioning. That's an avoidable hinder. Okay. Two players bumping into each other because I thought you were going to go left and you went right. Nobody's setting up to kill it into the left front corner. It's just an inadvertent bump. That's a hinder. It's just the way it is. So understanding the difference there and the players understanding, pardon for putting it this way, but how much they could get away with, where that line was and how they played. I mean, Strandemo used to have a style of kind of coming up and getting underneath you a little bit and looking up, and you knew he was there. He wasn't really in the way, but he sort of was. And, everybody had their own little thing. And the more I refed, the more I was able to understand what was going on and make the appropriate call. And we kind of worked all together. They knew how I was going to call the match, and I knew how they were going to play the match. And we just kind of worked it out. As far as I invented the technical foul, because I wasn't going to take crap from the players, back talk and profanity and, just poor sportsmanship kinds of things. But I wanted them to put their personality on display if they wanted to, and each player had a different personality. I wanted them to become, no different than McEnroe and Connors back in the tennis days. Each player has his or her personality. Keeley was stoic. They're all different, which is fine because we thought we were building something, and you wanted that. I want to see Brumfield. He's he pulls all this stuff. Oh, I want to see Surratt. He's I want to see Schmidtke. All he does is kill the ball from 39 and a half feet, whatever it was. Diving was unbelievable. There is maybe 20 players in the country, 3 players, 4 players who could dive, retrieve the ball, and then do something with it, other than just get it back to the wall, but actually do something with it. I think Surratt for sure was one of the best divers. Everybody dove, if they had to, nobody wanted to. What you had to do as a referee is when they dove, assuming they successfully retrieved the ball, now you got somebody who's prone on the floor, scrambling, trying to get in position to retrieve the next shot. And you have the opponent who's got a plum, because the person just dove and you barely got it back. And, so if in the process of getting up to get back into position, you take away that plum shot from the other opponent, that's an avoidable hinder. Things like that. Yeah, that was fun. And people went wild because they'd never seen, diving. Oh my God. And then diving, actually doing something with the ball. It was pretty cool. Maybe time dulls the memory, but I don't have any negative recollections. The stuff with Drake, as an example, never bothered me. Charlie had a vested interest in certain players winning. And I knew that, everybody knew that, but that's irrelevant. Just because a sponsor or any person wants one of the competitors to beat the other, so what? That's always, that's always the case. It has nothing to do with anything that goes on inside the court. And if I called the match properly, and that would mean that the best player would win, and that's the way it had to be. And that was a really important component because otherwise, pardon the expression in today's society, otherwise it would have been rigged, and if people knew, oh, well, if you played for this sponsor, you were going to get a good draw or the ref was going to lean your way or something. No. That's why I had to do it, because I knew it was going to be done straight. Nobody ever threatened me that I remember. We go out and, party together after the matches and sometimes before the matches. There were some famous encounters, that some people remember, and many of them involving Brumfield, just because that was his personality. Charlie was, a master at psychology and getting inside players' heads. And he had this, this aura that kept telling people that, he had to do it because he was, just an average Joe and not nearly the athlete that the competitors, most of his competitors were, which wasn't true, but it was a nice line. And, Charlie was a great athlete. They're all great athletes. They're just different, based on their physical being. Schmidtke wasn't the fastest, but he had a deadly forehand. Wagner could get anything. Halesher, had the beautiful mix of forehand and backhand. Surratt, was special. Keeley could do anything on the court. They were all great, just different. Same in tennis, same in squash, same in badminton, I'm sure. Same in handball, all these one-on-one competitive sports, and it was same in racquetball. The one that always stands out to me was the only time that anybody had ever had a technical foul call on them before the match started, which was Brumfield. Just Brumfield was being Brumfield, and whether it was they were arguing over which ball we were going to use, or I don't know. I don't remember what the situation was, but I had to call a technical foul on him, and so I remember distinctly how odd it sounded. 0 serving -1. And they're happy memories. I hope the players, as they look back on those years, at least honestly believe that I gave them a fair shot, and it didn't matter who they were, who their sponsor was, what the round was, what their seed was. None of that mattered. It's just two guys on the court and have a great match. As far as other off the court shenanigans, there were tons of them. I mean, one time we thought it would be pretty funny to spike the Gatorade jug with vodka and not tell anybody. That was a mistake. But I mean, silly things like that. We play cards all night or go to bed at 6 and have a match to ref at 9. That wasn't always easy. But it was fun. It was good times. It was good times. Another reason I like to ref the match is I could take notes. And I remember I had to go back and write up the tournament for the magazine. And so if I'm reffing, I know I'm in the middle of it, and I could circle a point or a rally or write a note. Oh, this was a key point, on this one. And so my scorecard looked like hieroglyphics. And then I'd go back and try and decipher it pretty quickly. Whereas most people, they're done with the match, they throw the scorecard away. No, I needed that. That was like my notes. So there was one year somebody invented an electronic machine that created a beam that went along the floor, and it could detect whether the ball skipped or hit the wall first, which is always, one of the toughest calls to make. Was it good? Was it not? And we tested it, in several tournaments, and felt really good that we could take the human error out of the skip shot by using this device. And I thought, wow, that's going to be awesome. And, we used it in early rounds, and the players said, yeah, this will work. And so I can't remember where we were. We were in a tournament and we turned it on. Match starts, and, a couple points into the match, whoever it was hits the ball. It's about 2 feet off the ground, not anywhere near a skip. And the beam goes off, the light goes on. And you go, what? That was weird, And then a couple plays later, the same kind of thing happened. And turns out that the club, in preparation for the tournament, had just painted the courts. And the force of the ball and the suction of the ball when it would hit the wall was causing microscopic paint chips to flutter down and break the beam of light. And we decided to turn the machine off. By the way, that's my Hall of Fame placard on the wall there.
I was going to ask that. I thought maybe that had something to do with racquetball. When did you get inducted into the Hall of Fame?
I'd have to go look. 1996 or 7, something like that. That was a happy moment. I was pleased and proud that my contributions to the sport were acknowledged. I've been a lymphoma patient since 2013.
Oh my goodness.
And I've had 3 different types of lymphoma. I'm still here.
Yeah.